I've written 19 so far. And I'm just wondering, how many of you like to read? Put your hand if you like to read. How many of you, not so much? Okay, how come? Yeah. It's boring? When you're bored, you read, but if you're not bored, you don't read? Okay. What's another reason that some of you might not really enjoy reading? Yeah. You'd rather watch movies. Okay.
Don't have the time very often.
Don't have the time. That's another reason. Anybody here not like reading? For any reason? Yeah? Got better things to do? Sure. Absolutely. How many people here knew how to read by the time they were 9 years old?
I don't remember.
Did you notice that I did not put up my hand? I didn't learn how to read till I was 9. So I actually failed grade 4. And I didn't learn how to read till I was in grade 4 for the second time. You guys have EQAO, right? But in the 60s, they didn't call it that. They just called it the big fat test. So one day I walked in, and they don't give you warning either. So I walked in one day, and it was the day of the big fat test. And it was sitting there, and I'm like flipping through it. I can't read it. I can't do the math. I can't do anything. So I got 0. And they, like the teacher then realized, like the big lie, that every single thing that I had been doing up until that point was completely fake, and I had been faking it all that time. It was incredibly humiliating. But also that year, it was the same year that my parents split up, and so it was a difficult year. Like, it was a difficult year emotionally, but also having all that stuff happen, and like kids in school started to make fun of me too, because like obviously, like it was a big fail, right? A major fail to like get 0 on this test, and everybody knew. So I did have to repeat grade 4, and then when I was in grade 4 for the second time, all my friends were in grade 5. They wanted nothing to do with me. But like when I was still in grade 4 for that first time, my mom did go, and she asked for help from the teacher. And the teacher said, no, your daughter is unteachable. Your daughter will never learn how to read. Your daughter is the product of a broken home. Would that ever happen now? No. What would happen if you were having difficulty in school and one of your parents went and asked for help? What would happen?
The teachers would actually help you.
They wouldn't only actually help you. After you left, they would be going, yes! They would be so excited that the parents came in and asked for help. Do you know why they would be so excited? Anybody have an idea of why that would be so exciting to a teacher to have a parent come in and ask for help for their kids? The reason is because,
She can't see.
okay,
Extra money.
no, has nothing to do with money. Has nothing to do with money. Because the teachers know that if the parents are on side and they know that their kid is having trouble in school, they know that, and then they ask for help, they know that that kid is now going to get help from school and from home. So the kid will do well. End of story. Makes their job easier. But it didn't happen back then. So instead I failed, and no one was able to help me. And they didn't have extracurricular help or anything like that. My mom couldn't afford a tutor. She was a single mother. And back then too, women were paid less than men big time. So she had to raise my sister and I, and she was making about half of what a man would make. Because they just, they didn't think that women should be working back then. She couldn't even go to the bank and take money out on her own name. She had to have my father sign the slip even to take money out. Yes?
But what if you didn't want to?
Didn't want to what?
Stand.
Then she wouldn't get the money. It was all up to the man. And so I decided to take matters into my own hands because like my mom had tried to teach me how to read and it wasn't working. My sister had helped me fake, which kind of worked for a little while. So I went to the Brantford Public Library, and I couldn't read the books in the children's department, and also I thought that they stunk anyway, and I didn't want to try. Because like, you know, it was the whole, you know, See-Spot Run thing. But I did try a couple other picture books. And back in the 1960s, there was this brand new author who had just started. And I tried one of his books, and it was worse than See-Spot Run. It was The Cat in the Hat. And the reason that it was horrible is because it gave me nightmares. Who here got nightmares from The Cat in the Hat? And so after I read that book, I thought, okay, so books either bore me to pieces or they give me nightmares, these children's picture books. So forget about it. They're all evil. I'm not going to read them. So instead, I went to the adult department, and I was like, what, 9 years old? And I said, could I please have an adult library card? And they said, Marsha, like this is Brantford, they know everybody there. They said, Marsha, you just failed grade 4. You don't know how to read. Why do you think you would get an adult card? And I said, because the children's books are evil, and so I want to read something that isn't. And they said, well, actually, like if you're trying to look at novels, there's a whole room downstairs in the children's department that you have access to with your kid's card, and you can just look at novels. And they said, but like, you can't read. And I said, okay, that's fine. So I went into this other room, and I chose a really big fat book. It was called Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens. And I didn't choose it because I thought I could read. I thought that maybe if I carried a big book to school, people would think I was smart. Don't you think that's a good idea? Because someone carried, now, if you saw some kids with Oliver Twist, wouldn't you just assume they were smart? No. Yeah, I know, it didn't work. But what it did do was at recess, I could hold it in front of me, and when people punched, it was like a shield, right? Yeah, it helped. But then I did try opening it up, and I did try reading it, and I noticed immediately a difference between it and See-Spot Run. And the difference was like in the very first paragraph, there were more words than in all of See-Spot Run. But the other thing was that if I held Oliver Twist upside down, I could not read the book. If I held it in the mirror, I could not read the book. If I started from back to front, I couldn't read it because the words were too big, so I didn't recognize any of them. Because when you are dyslexic, you don't see words as individual combinations of letters. Like, you don't decode it that way. What you do is you see a word and you either know it or you don't, but you don't sound it out. And so these words were too big for me to know. I just didn't know them. So the first time in my life, at age 9, I had to actually look at a word that would say thoughtfully or something and go, okay, TH is it, you know, and the next, what is that? And then like try and sound out the words and say them out loud and hear what they were, and maybe ask anyone who was around me what the heck I just said, or whether I said it right. But like I had to actually decode words. And so it took me about a week to read the first paragraph, but by the end of the school year, I had read that whole book. And I found out that real reason why people read. And it's not because it's a subject in school that you want to do well in. Like, forget about that. It is for the free movies. You were saying you like to watch movies better, right? Well, I gotta tell you, the movies and books are way better because the actors are the right people. When you're, you know, you go see Hunger Games and they chose the wrong person, right? And it bugs you. But if you're reading a book, you can choose whoever you want to be all the characters, and you can be the most important character in the book. You see, right? And if you don't like the way that the author wrote something, then you can change a scene because it's all in your head. The other thing is you don't need a plug. You don't have to worry about commercials. And you can even watch that movie that's in your head at school, and usually you won't get into trouble. So that is what reading is all about, but I didn't know it until I read Oliver Twist. So then after I read Oliver Twist, I didn't know how to pick out books, and I was a really slow reader. But all I did was I went to the children's department section of novels, and I read all of the ones that were really fat, whose authors' last names started with either A, B, C, or D. And from grade 4 to grade 8, that's all I read. And then by then I knew how to pick out books better. But like, there's a lot of really good authors whose last name starts with A, B, C, or D, I gotta tell you. But I also decided back then that what I wanted to do was to write books like I wished they had written for me before I knew how to read. And one of the things that I like to do is to write books on really serious subjects, meaty subjects, and I don't assume that kids are not smart. I know that actually kids are a smarter audience than adults. And you know why? Because kids that I know, they may be worried and concerned about and thinking about things like a world war, a next world war, about global warming, about all sorts of stuff, right? Do you know what a lot of adults are thinking about right now? They're wondering whether they took the chicken out to thaw for supper. Okay? They're wondering whether they paid the visa bill. It's just a difference, and I don't mean to be insulting to adults, but it's true. Because when you're a kid, it's the time that you can think about the big subjects. Once you get to be an adult, oftentimes you're not. And even if you look at adult books, a lot of times they are so lame compared to young adult books. Because like adult books oftentimes will be about something like a love story, like Gag Me with a Spoon. Or they'll be about some lawyer that stole money, right? Like who cares? So when I started writing, I wanted to write serious books about real history for an audience that was intelligent. And that's why I write what I write. I would hold it in the mirror and I would understand as many words as I would reading it normally. I could start from the back to the front. And in fact, even now when I read a paper magazine, I tend to start from the back and then go to the front because I'm dyslexic, right? And so I went all the way through. They actually skipped me out of kindergarten. I was only there for 2 weeks. And then I went through grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, not learning how to read because the books were so plain. They were all like that. They were just instructional manuals about how to read as a subject, as opposed to a story that made you actually want to read it. In grade 3, I started to do very poorly in school. And my sister was 1 year older than me. And it embarrassed her that her younger sister was making her look bad, she thought. So she told everybody that we weren't related. Like, well, typical big sister, right? But like nobody believed her because like my mom would dress us in the exact same outfits every day and they said, she is so your sister.